Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. Today is the 1st of June, and we are 5 days away from D-Day, June 6th celebration. And we have a replay today of John O'Loughlin's interview of Dave Underdown, and that originally aired on the 24th of May. And so we have that coming up in a couple minutes. At noon, we have George Webb, who's still in Geneva or a few miles away. And then at 2 o'clock, we have Mark Kulak coming on for Housatonic Live with Carol McIntosh. At 4 o'clock, we have Andy Dabala in the Neighborhood News Hour. And at 5 o'clock, it's Wendy's World with Wendy Sloan. Okay, so in a couple seconds, I will start the replay of John O'Loughlin's interview of Dave Underdown. And just have to remember the audio tab. Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com, one of the most censored websites in America today. Today is May 24th. And kicking off the day will be Mr. John O'Loughlin with McDuff Lives and interviewing David Underdown. And then at noon, we have George Webb. At 2 o'clock, Mark Kulak with Housatonic Live and special guest West Coast Carol. At 4 o'clock, we have Chris Hunter. And 5 o'clock, we have the Duke Report. Okay, without further ado, I'll kick it off to you, gentlemen. And take it away.
And it's eek, 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 eek. Welcome, everybody, here to McDuff Lives here from Mystery Island Studio in Southern Maryland, USA, on the East Coast, where it is raining like cats and dogs right now. And this morning, we had a bit of a change. Our scheduled guest, Harley Schlanger, who's been so gracious to be here every other Tuesday at this time slot, had a call from his doctor, said you need to come and get this test done, and unfortunately the time to do it was right now, so it's not a big deal, but he had to bow out this morning. He'll be back probably in 2 weeks, if not before then. His work recently has been absolutely superb, and I've referenced it many times on my Twitter and otherwise, so make sure and keep up with Harley Schlanger by following him on his Twitter or at schillerinstitute.com. Well, I was happy to have a positive response from Dave Underdown this morning when I said, wow, my brain is empty. I don't want to have to do a whole show by myself. Who can I reach out to? And so I reached out to Dave, and true to form, I mean, he's got, his green on. I've got my green on. We've got Green Monkey in the background. And it seems like, it's just fate. It's just meant to be. So welcome, Dave Underdown. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me in as a fill-in for Harley. That's quite big shoes to try to fill.
Yeah, well, it is. And but you've got a pair of size 12s yourself there. The Great Narrative, I just got it in the mail yesterday. This is the follow-up to COVID-19, the Great Reset. And I obviously haven't read it, but if you're like me, sometimes you just open up a book and see what it opens up to. And I did that, and it says synthetic biology. Let me read a little bit from this and see what you think about it. And this is Klaus Schwab and Thierry Maleret, page 102. It is often said that the 19th century was the century of chemistry, the 20th century of physics, and the 21st century will be that of biology, a century during which we will re-engineer biological systems to meet human demands. I hate that. I'm going to go on. We are at the dawn of the genetics revolution, having sequenced the human genome, turned adult cells into stem cells, understood how to rewrite the genetic code of any living cell. and reduced the cost of hacking genes by a factor of millions. Besides, we already have a successful example proving that synthetic biology delivers on its promises. Just as World War II accelerated electronics, the pandemic has propelled the genetics revolution towards new frontiers. When COVID-19 struck, it triggered an immediate and furious search for a vaccine. Those that came first are mRNA vaccines that insert synthetic strings of genetic code that are computer modeled into our bodies. Instead of triggering our immune system with a traditional vaccine that injects a weakened, dead, or partial pathogen, mRNA vaccines instruct our cells to produce the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. By doing so, they, quote, transform our bodies into personalized manufacturing plants, producing an otherwise foreign object to trigger our natural immune response. This approach will soon create a whole new platform for fighting cancers and other diseases, as well as for providing enhancements even more profound than vaccination, unquote. The potential of such Promethean technologies seems amazing and infinite, transforming our healthcare so that personalized treatments and predictive health issue modeling become possible, brewing animal proteins from cell cultures and generating energy from algae to save the planet. These and many other applications seem within reach, but so too does the possibility to use them for the wrong purpose, inadvertently, implicitly, or with intent. The potential of some synthetic biology is such that it's not hard to imagine what could go wrong. What if, in the case of a pandemic, we only inoculate citizens in the rich countries? What if we improve or prolong the life of only those who can afford it? What if we start discriminating against people based on their genetic information? What if soon anyone can make a virus from scratch? What if genetic manipulation of pre-implanted embryos leads to eugenics? What if a country or a malicious group decides to produce a dangerous, unknown synthetic pathogen? What if the next pandemic is lab-made? What if a pathogen is enhanced to increase transmissibility or its ability to cause disease is augmented? These are a few common sense questions for which we don't, parentheses yet, have an answer. The fundamental issue of how our newfound ability to manipulate life will impact our humanness challenges our beliefs, morals, religion, and politics at their very core. And we are ill prepared for that. As the naturalist E.O. Wilson said, quote, we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies, unquote. I'll stop there. He's basically saying, hey, we know all the stuff that you're scared about. You know, yeah, you're right to be scared about it. But you need somebody that really understands how to manage it to make sure that it doesn't go off the tracks. And that, of course, would be us. We can handle all this for you. But it reminds me kind of something that I heard from Mark Kulak, and that is the idea that it's coming and there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to be here. There's this synthetic biology is going to come in and, take over humanity. And I have a huge problem with that. I don't want synthetic biology. I want biology. Leave the synthetic stuff to the computer world and let me be fully natural, if you please, Mr. Customs Man. What do you think, Dave?
Well, the first thing I thought of when you were reading that was the Milken Institute talking about going from traditional egg-based vaccines to the mRNA model that Rick Bright wanted the entity of excitement and to have an event that triggers this need to go into what they just describe as designer medicine that's made your infection or your disease is identified, and you're, in real time able to create a solution for it. And again, like, this stuff is, for me, I'm very, really concerned about the fact that a lot of these programs are done under, DTRA and DARPA, and seemingly under the Department of Energy and the Atomic Energy Commission before it, under the Manhattan Project. And it just, I don't know. I mean, this is something that I feel needs to be transparent, and what they're doing is they're making it so complicated that the average person isn't qualified to evaluate it. And that's the first thing they do to dismiss people with concerns about it, is that they're not qualified to analyze it.
Yeah, that of course is, as I've been reading from Behold a Pale Horse by oh, why is my mind not Bill Cooper. Thank you. The next section is about distractions. It's a huge part of their plan is to keep us distracted, so that not only are all of us that have higher educations generally have been put into a stovepipe of some sort, that you're going to be a stock analyst, and you're going to be a computer scientist, and you're going to be a metallurgist, and you're going to be a chemist, but you get specialized, and you kind of get the idea that everybody has their specialty, and we're all part of this great big thing that's solving the problem of how do we live, in a peaceful and in a natural way. And the positive feeling of being an expert, and it just makes you feel like you're fulfilling your life in a positive way to help humanity. But what's really going on is you are being stovepiped into a world where all you see is stuff related to your particular expertise. And the idea of having what used to be called a Renaissance education is no longer anybody's goal. It's now a goal to become the best at something so you can get rich quick, or just because you want to be good at it. That idea of synthetic biology as a way to speed up the improvement of humanity is kind of just the same thing I keep talking about, that these people think that the role of us on Earth is to improve humanity itself, as if we were God, as if we were the creator. And we're not. So introducing synthetic biology, which means instead of carbon based, it's like silicone based or copper based or something else based. It's not organic, but it's going into us in order to facilitate things that they want, not things that we want. I mean, their whole big drama that they put on for the past 2 or 3 years is trying to convince us that we need this stuff. That if we hadn't had mRNA technology, then half the world would be dead from COVID right now. That's their pitch, and it's not. And to me, it's falling flat on its face. But to the media, to the most of the world, everybody's still scared and perfectly willing to forget about their doubts about COVID, because hey, what's the next thing? It's monkeypox,
Yep. And monkeypox, of course, brings us right into the nuclear threat initiative, which we've talked about a lot. That's the they did a tabletop exercise in 2021 where they projected at the Munich Security Forum that there would be a monkeypox pandemic. And then, of course, our friends from Fort Detrick, Sina Bavari and Jens Kuhn from Tunnel Services, they're Bavarian Nordic company, or Bavarian Nordic company, then becomes the Threat Initiative. Has, a lot of the same characters from Thormanos, which was, which was going to be the next sort of Bill Gates or Steve Jobs kind of. Elizabeth Holmes was this, young genius that was going to, create this biotech company, who partners with the same characters of Henry Kissinger, Sam Nunn, George Shultz, Tim Dillon, whose grandfather was, one of the founders of Geither, Dillon, and Anderson. And
Is that C. Douglas Dillon by any chance?
You know what? I've got the wrong name. It's Draper. He worked at the grandfather, Henry, or let's see, it's William Draper Jr. He worked at Dillon Reed, though. He was doing the bonds for Germany in the post-World War I, and also Russian. He then he was the head of Inter-American Bank. He was I think, the first ambassador to NATO. His family is a very important family to know. Their last name is Draper, but they're very deeply tied to the Dillon family through the Douglas Dillon and through Dillon Reed, the investment bank. But again, it's the same. You have these same characters. Elizabeth Holmes, her family's background, aides, the Charlie's Angels. He had these really, hot secretaries that worked, in Capitol Hill. And of course, he had Joanne Herring, who was very famous for being the socialite from Houston that wanted to help arm the Mujahideen against the Russians, and during what was called Operation Cyclone, which was the overthrow of Iran. And her dad worked at Enron, which, again, Joanne Herring's next door neighbor growing up was James Baker, and James Baker was chief counsel for Enron. So you have all these same characters of Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Sam Nunn, William Perry, and then also Ted Turner, who was in on the initial nuclear threat initiative. And their financer was Warren Buffett. This nuclear threat initiative was the vehicle that Buffett gave the $50 million to create the low-enriched uranium fuel bank in Kazakhstan, which is where a lot of this Lugar-Nunn nuclear non-proliferation agreement happened. I mean, that was where Ken Alabek, who we talked to, we texted, where we were on Twitter talking about Alabek a little bit, but that was where Alabek was for quite a bit of his career, doing the carryover from what was called the Biopreparat program and the Vector lab, which is, again, brings us right to Jens Kuhn and his tunnel services and Bavarian Nordic, because he was the first Westerner that went into the Vector lab after it was part of this non-proliferation agreement.
I don't know if you saw my show yesterday, but on that point of Bavarian, the first thing that hit me when I saw that story was, wait a minute, Sina Bavarian was in charge when in the summer of 2019 at Fort Detrick, yep, when they had a security breach. And then you read the scenario for the 2021 monkeypox epidemic breakout, where they do the crisis scenario. And how did the monkeypox get out? It got out from a security leak stolen by a terrorist. So if you needed to have, if you're doing predictive programming, if you're putting, the 9/11 in people's minds, or if you're trying to get the contagion idea into people's minds, if you're doing a predictive programming project, then when you see Bavarian and that Fort Detrick lab leak, kind of way back in the back of your mind. And then you come to this scenario, and that's what they put into the script for their scenario. That's a coincidence. Now, the very company started by Sina Bavari is the one that comes up with the vaccine or the cure to fix the monkeypox that leaked in exactly the same way as was prescribed exactly 1 year before, to leak on May 15th, 2022 in this scenario. And as far as we can tell, that's when it came out. The number of coincidences here is just completely unbelievable. So how can we let people know? I mean, this is like, come on, Sina Bavari was in the middle of the leak. He's in the middle of the crisis analysis, and now he's in the middle of selling the. You made the point, but I think to go back to where George Webb had started, with Sina Bavari being in charge of the Fort Detrick lab when they had a security breach. It's just too many coincidences. I can't handle it.
Well, Mark Kulak had a great program yesterday where he was talking about Margaret Hamburg and her history. He's talked a lot about her. She's another person that was sitting on that exact same panel at the Milken Institute, where Rick Bright, who was the head of what was called the BARDA program, and Anthony Fauci, they were on a panel where they're talking about this need to go into the mRNA vaccines, and that the egg-based model, the traditional model, its useful life was over. It wasn't fast enough in reacting to these emerging pandemics. And here you have Margaret Hamburg, who was I think she was the head of the NIH maybe under Obama, before Collins, but I'm not sure her exact position. But she had a role in the NIH, or maybe it was Health and Human Services. And then she goes on to become the chief scientist for this nuclear threat initiative that we just talked about. So you have your diplomatic people, your Kissinger, Schultz, Sam Nunn, and William Perry, who all have this, are probably our four most experienced diplomats that were living when this was created. And then you have this Margaret Hamburg, who is, has this experience within our health systems. And then she becomes the chief scientist. She's the one that leads the tabletop exercise on this monkeypox outbreak. She's the keynote signer on the report. And then, now you get into her husband, whose name is Peter Brown. And Peter Brown is Robert Mercer. And they both were recruited at the same time to work at a company called Renaissance Technologies, which is a quantitative based investment services company, very prestigious. They, people that watch that show Billions on HBO, that was based off of Renaissance. And so Renaissance has another interesting character that was the founder, named James Simons. And James Simons was I think he was at MIT, but he did a lot of work with IBM's computers. And then he sort of created these algorithms to do financial analysis using computers. And he recruited Robert Mercer and Peter Brown. Now, Robert Mercer is very well known because he was the main backer of Donald Trump, and his daughter, Rebecca Mercer, who also works at Renaissance Technologies, has worked a lot with Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway, and all those characters come out of the Robert Mercer umbrella.
Tell me a little bit, if I may, more about Robert Mercer. What does he represent? Renaissance Technologies. I understand that, but is he like an old time robber baron, or is he somebody that works with a particular bank, or is he a self-made man, or
I think he's a science guy overall. I don't know. It's hard to tell because, just reading like Wikipedia, reading articles, to me, he's clearly intelligence. I mean, he works with Bannon, who we know was O&I background. He was part of the, naval intelligence program, which, has roots going up, very old roots, but more, 20th century, the Operation Underworld was the O&I and the mafia, joining forces. And I don't think that relationship ever ended. So to me, what Robert Mercer represents he was the financier of a company called SCL, which then later branded itself as Cambridge Analytica, which people may remember because that was, again, a big Bannon program where they allegedly stole, I think, 80 million Facebook profiles. Cambridge Analytica and SCL is, to me, very much like the kind of the private version of the MI6 or the SES.
Sounds like a safari club, actually.
Oh, it ties deeply to Safari Club because so after they kind of collapsed it after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, got a lot of press, they rebranded it as a company called Emerdata, EMERDATA. And the people that are on the board of Emerdata were the same. The guy's name is Alexander Nix, is the British guy that is sort of the founder of SCL. And then there was a Chinese guy that was a board member. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he was the Frontier Services Group head, which was, Eric Prince's company that we talked a lot about. They had the contract to basically do security for the Belt and Road project. Their main shareholder was the CEFC, the Chinese bank that Hunter Biden was, doing the dealings with, as far as Yi Jiaming was the head of it. He was, again, sort of this superstar banker that was doing all these Belt and Road projects and, industrializing China. And he got into this deal with Glencore, which is Mark Rich's old company, which is currently owned by Oleg Deripaska and Roman Abramovich, both two, major Russian oligarch characters. And then Glencore, which is the Russian state petroleum company. And so and then the other part of that deal was the Qatar Investment Authority. So you have these four sort of like major global players. They're doing this 20-year petroleum deal between Russia and China, Qatar, and Glencore is a Swiss company, so they're kind of in the middle there. But a lot of the problems that we're seeing now are out of this, at least the way I see it is that it related to the overthrow or the basically the end of the Soviet Russia. All of these oligarchs sort of coming in, they nationalized their major industries, their fuel, their gas, their oil, and then they placed these oligarchs to kind of run these companies. And George has talked about this a lot, how they were backed by, what we've talked about is the Synarchy bankers, the City of London, the Wall Street bankers. But then they get into these joint ventures, and the rules were you had to have at least, I think, 51% owned by a Russian, and then their partners end up kind of all dying. And that's the kind of a big part of George's his research and investigation is, what's going on with these oligarchs that end up dying, and then who's kind of taking their assets. And is that the long play that they're doing is they went from having nationalized resources in Russia to then privatize companies, and then the partners are kind of picking off the part of their people that were in the deal with them to just sort of overtake the whole thing. And it's a very interesting concept, and something that I've been looking at quite a bit, because you had with the Yukos, which was the oil company before before Rosneft. They had a big shares for they called it a loan for shares scandal, and the guy that was running it, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he ended up going to jail, very similar to the way that Yi Jiaming, the CEFC CEO, ends up going to jail. And the person that ends up getting his Yukos shares is Jacob Rothschild. And Jacob Rothschild, of course, his son is Nathan, who's best friends with Oleg Deripaska and Roman Abramov. So you have all this sort of the same guys. And then, of course, Jacob Rothschild's dad was Victor. And Victor was he was in the Cambridge Apostles. So he's right in there with, all of your intrigue of, the Cambridge Five and all that stuff. So when you get to a company calling itself Cambridge Analytica, which is doing sort of spy services, that's the first thing I think. Is this just the Cambridge Five, doing a kind of an OSS and SIS joint venture? Is it just the extension of it now? And I think the answer is definitely yes on that.
All of these people that you mentioned, do you see them as fashioning a one world order together through perhaps a hidden guiding hand that has one of them doing this and one of them doing that and one of them doing something else? But ultimately, this is all kind of one big plan of consolidating power over the whole world. Or are you seeing different groups fighting against different groups within that to try to control the control group before they make the big play to control the whole world? This is a kind of a Lord of the Rings level question. What do you think?
Thing to think about. I mean, part of the whole thing for me is trying to figure out, well, who are even the contenders? Which families are the ones that you can even throw into that? Because so much has been built into the whole, like, if you say Rothschild, you're automatically part of a conspiracy that's incorrect, where, you need to learn the different families, because they don't just represent, Bank of England and British interests. They became the heads of the French banking system, the Austrian banking system, the German, the Italian. So, to me, I always have seen it as there's been a lot more kind of over control over these nations than what I think a lot of people analyze. Like, I think, like, if you look at a lot of the talk right now, they're talking about Taiwan versus China, and is Biden gonna respect the sovereignty of Taiwan, or is he going to go with the one China program? And that was what Kissinger was talking about the other day. But of course, I look at it more as like, well, if you go back to the Boxer rebellion, which I think is really important to look at, because that was when Herbert Hoover was over there initially as a miner, providing coal to the Chinese Navy. That was like an overthrow of a dynasty, and that was a really ancient empire that changed. And then they bring in these sort of new characters, and it seems like the Sung sisters are everywhere. They're married to all the key components, whether it's the KMT, Chiang Kai-shek, or if it's a character like TV Sung, who is their brother, who's a big banker, has a lot of ties to Western banking. And then you have a guy named H.H. Kung, who is married to one of the Sung sisters also. and he represented the Mao Zedong banking interests, and he was the one that was, meeting with Helmar Schlacht and Hitler and Mussolini and Roosevelt, and then eventually becomes the Chinese representative for Bretton Woods. So when a lot of this stuff we're talking about now, like the World Economic Forum and the IMF and all these entities were sort of created, he was the Chinese representative, and now he was somebody. What's that?
I got to get straight on this. You're saying that H.H. Kung was the representative was the banker for Mao's Chinese investments, and
he was like the Treasury Secretary of China for like almost his whole adult career.
But
they don't.
We're talking about a time when the Mao and Chiang are, well, what years are we talking here? 20s or 30s, or because I'm trying to understand how it is that H.H. Kung could represent China at the Bretton Woods talks, which is in 43, I think, or 44,
right?
When he's on the Mao side, but actually the government is run by the Chiang Kai-shek side until 1949, right?
Right.
So that just seems like how did they it just struck me as a non sequitur. Sorry.
Well, I mean, he was he was married to one of the Song girls, and they I don't think they change out their positions like they do in here, where you have a new cabinet every 4 years.
Married to this Kung, they're all married to this. I had no idea that H.H. Kung was married to, that he was a brother-in-law of Chiang Kai-shek.
But if you look at the Frontier Services Group, which appears to be sort of a mercenary army force that Eric Prince is running, he's partnered with a group called the XPCC, which was created by Mao Zedong, and I think in 1954, and had like over 1 million people in it. But the first commander of it was initially an aide to Chiang Kai-shek, and then he moved over to Mao Zedong and starts running this XPCC, which is they're involved in the Operation Cyclone also. So you have the division between the communist China and the KMT China Taiwanese, it's murky. It's just not like a clear cut. Like, I don't know if you think of it almost like the way that Americans would think of the Civil War, and that you may have some family that lives down south and some up north, and so there's gray areas in the division. But again, like to just make a blanket statement that China is behind it's so incomplete, because there's even the top leaders, that there was a lot of crossover between those groups.
Clearly, but just from my own particular history of my dad, I know that MacArthur did not let the OSS into his part of China, whereas the OSS did go to Mao's part of China. So to me, it's one of those FBI versus CIA things, or the MacArthur empire versus the Dulles empire. By the way, just as a note from what you were saying earlier, remember how the Dulles brothers got to be in control of Sullivan and Cromwell was that the preceding partners suddenly had health emergencies, died off. It looks very suspicious. This is a tactic that it's hard to believe that they would do these things, but they do. I had a friend 20 some years ago married a Russian bride, and gorgeous, one of those models that you see in, they used to advertise in magazines, right here for get a Russian bride. Well, he did.
Yeah.
And he died of cancer about 10 years ago, and so I'm sure it was true love, but it's also a metaphorical way of describing how they can take things over. It's not a new technique either. I mean, just look at all this the men of the nobility that would marry the rich women so that they could have their money. It's just they've gone one step further and putting a beautiful woman out there as a lure. And I saw a story like that from Ireland that was going around. Our friend Garland Nixon published it. Was a guy, Irish man takes a Ukrainian refugee woman into home and then runs off with her, leaving wife and family alone.
Yeah.
He runs off with the Ukrainian woman. Well, I'm sorry, but Ukraine does have a reputation for putting its women into glossy magazines and things. Ukraine is a mess. I'm not going anywhere with that except for just to, yeah. All right. Yeah. There you take it. Go ahead.
An interesting sidebar was that, of course, Detroit, we had our Russian 5 hockey players, and one of them, Fedorov, he had the most beautiful Russian girlfriend, Anna Kournikova, the tennis player. So she used to be around this area a little bit, and yeah, they have some very beautiful beautiful girls that they can certainly get your attention.
And we don't mean to disregard Maria Butina when we're mentioning beautiful Oconus lures. Let's make sure that she gets her word in, because I mean, she's been one of the most effective Oconus lures of history. Wouldn't you agree?
I think so. I mean, I think that her partnership with what was it? It wasn't. Let's see, I'm trying to think who she was with. The central banker from Russia. She was the assistant to, and I'm blanking on his name right now. But yeah, I mean, she was in with our treasury secretaries, our central bank leader, Stanley Fisher. And she had, she was at American University, which has a lot of, really interesting characters also, with Susan Rice being there, and with Sylvia Burwell, who was there. I've got Bo. I don't have a babysitter for Bo on short notice.
Bo. Well, we saw a little bit of Bo's left ear there, but he's such a handsome dog.
Yeah, he's really sweet. I think he's heard about. He just heard Anna Kournikova, and he wanted to get interested.
Well, I was kind of that way when you said Charlie's Angels. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, no, the Charlie's Angels apparently was built off of Charles Wilson, and I'm always interested in Charlie Wilson because Charles Wilson was the General Motors. He was the GM CEO that was brought in to be the Secretary of Defense with Alan Dulles and do the New Look program. And he was somebody that was a delivery customer at our dry cleaning store. I mean, he lived right by our store, and his daughter-in-law was buddies with my terrible step-grandmother. And, so those names, and they also had he was called Engine Charlie. And then there was Electric Charlie, also Charlie Wilson, that was from General Electric. So you have these same names, and of course Charlie Wilson was known as being this big playboy and having the beautiful assistants, and they called them the Charlie's Angels. And Elizabeth Holmes, a beautiful girl too, and she had her mom was one of the assistants.
So hot they had to get Julia Roberts to play Herring. So these. Beautiful though.
She granted, she had the Roman orgy party that made Life magazine, which is a little bit scandalous, but she was a very beautiful woman.
A little scandal never hurts. Get your name in the paper.
That's right.
It was Deripaska. Brightmore suggests it might have been Deripaska.
Well, Deripaska, he is fascinating because he was the one that Robert Mueller hired privately to try to get Bob Levinson free. When Bob Levinson was captured, I think still a prisoner, he recruited Oleg Deripaska to be the Russian oligarch to sort of broker this release of Bob Levinson. And then, of course, Deripaska is interesting for local Detroit because he was the Russian oligarch that was brought in to buy all the steel companies in Detroit and was part of the auto bailout deal. So that now makes me think, okay, is he partnered with Kolomoisky also? Because Kolomoisky, of course, owns a lot of the industrial assets in Cleveland, Ohio, which is not far from Detroit. And there's a lot of historical crossover between Detroit and Cleveland. Yeah, his Butina was it wasn't set. Yeah, it was.
You published a picture of her with Steve Bannon.
Not with Bannon, with Byrne. So she dated Patrick Byrne, and Patrick Byrne, who was the Overstock CEO, whose dad was Jack Byrne, that was one of Warren Buffett's top guys. He ran Geico, which was Warren Buffett's favorite company, and he grew up with Warren Buffett and all this stuff. And then he goes on later. I didn't hear him say it, but Aaron said that in a speech that Patrick Byrne gives, he names Peter Strzok as the FBI agent that recruits him. During the election, he would just say, "Oh, these men in black are coming up to me. These men in black are asking me to spy on this Russian girl, and so I'm doing this special mission that the men in black have assigned to me." And he's, of course, very mysterious about it. But then he name drops Peter Strzok later, which I thought was who I would have guessed.
Men in black means Jesuits.
I thought Men in Black meant FBI. I thought it was part of the G-Men. It can also mean Mormons too, right?
FBI weren't Men in Black. No, I mean they wore suits, but it didn't have to be black suits like Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith.
It's also a Matrix.
Yeah, they were gumshoes, but they always wore suits, and they always had to wear a hat,
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely, required. And Men in Black, to me, I think Jesuits. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not. But Peter Strzok, when you say Peter Strzok, well, we're talking about direct Catholic connection. Through his father with Catholic charities in Africa, doing, quote unquote charitable work, unquote, whatever they were doing.
They also have the great connection with Peter Strzok at MITRE at the Hanscom Air Force Base in Bedford, Mass. And that was where the B-25, I think, takes off and then crashes into the Empire State Building in 1945. The two floors it crashes into is Catholic Relief Services, is the floor that it crashes into. And then the person that takes over those two spaces after they're rebuilt out is our favorite Armand Hammer, the buddy of Al Gore and Albert Gore Sr. And that was where he created Occidental Petroleum, was in the crash site of the Empire State Building. And that was, of course, was owned by our other favorite, John Jacob Raskob, who was the treasurer of the Knights of Malta.
It's clearly tight Catholic way, Catholic aristocracy connections. Once you say Raskob, and then that all ties into the businessman's coup, and that all ties into the entire synarchy.
Pierre Dupont.
Yeah, it's all synarchy related, as Harley wrote in his most recent essay, which I don't know if you had a chance to read that yet. It's really.
I just read it. One thing I did want to say about the DuPonts also that I think is an important thing to remember was that they were a major contributor to the creation of the laboratories at MIT. So when you think of MIT, a lot of the DuPont family was educated there, and they were also very big benefactors of those labs that then go on to sort of become the Vannevar Bush. And, we've talked about the Arthur Compton and, the Alfred Loomis and all those guys that kind of get into this Manhattan Project. A lot of that was, DuPont also has that angle besides their real estate plays with the Empire State Building and the Equitable Building and a lot of, important buildings in New York.
How did they get that pilot to fly that B-25 into the New York, into hit the right floor and everything? Did they have something on them and they were going to blackmail them if they didn't do it or something?
I've never read anything other than like the Wikipedia article on it, and it says that it swerved out of the way of the Chrysler Building, and then it also has a crazy
oh, here comes the Chrysler Building. I better turn.
You don't want to hit Walter Chrysler. He's from Michigan. So they swerved out of the Chrysler.
That's like the lady that reported to her the accident to her insurance company. Said the telephone pole was on the left side of the road, and then it was on the right side of the road, and then I hit it.
You gotta look up the Wikipedia on the crash, because it also has the great story of the elevator operator woman that I think fell 80 plus floors and survived it.
Oh,
she broke her hip, but she went all the way down the elevator shaft during the crash, but miracle, she lived. And that was one that when I told my nephew that one, he accused me of fake news on that. But I said, if you trust Wikipedia, that's what the write-up is. But the other key thing with that crash, besides Arm & Hammer and Occidental Petroleum, is that was the tort reform. They said they really wanted to get the tort reform in there, and that was the incident. And it also was right before the atomic bombs were dropped also, I think just less than 2 weeks. So I always thought, is that just a big play on the King Kong and sort of the racism of the Asians with the King Kong and all that, King Kong versus Godzilla? Was that another kind of play into the whole crashing of the Empire State Building?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking out loud, and I'll share my thoughts with you, and that is that why was it so important for them to pass the Federal Tort Claims Act? And the answer is that it opens up the coffers of Uncle Sam's money to tort claims.
Mm-hmm.
You ran over my foot with your train, and now I need $1 million. I have fibromyalgia because of getting knocked down by one of your baggage cars or something. I mean, the idea where I'm going with this is that what Kissinger and Leo Strauss, what all of these people are talking about doing is reducing the standard of living of the American people to that compatible with the standard of living of the Soviet Union. And in order to do that, they do crazy things like build wind turbines instead of power generating, and draining the money out, and to allow for federal tort claims is a great way to drain the money out of the federal treasury. That's the only motive I could think of, but I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, obviously law is your expertise, and that makes sense to me. The other thing that I think is really important to bring forward is that Al Gore and Arm & Hammer were critical in the negotiation of not only the privatization of the Elk Hills Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but also the megatons to megawatts program was negotiated by Gore. And that is a key thing to think about as far as the Lugar-Nunn treaty, which is also tied to that megatons to megawatts program. So a lot of, Hillary and Bill and the Clinton Foundation get a lot of looks, but I kind of tend to go with Al Gore more. I mean, he's at Kleiner Perkins right now, which is a big kind of a venture capitalist firm out in Silicon Valley, and his family relationship with Arm & Hammer. And of course, being from Detroit, I am very interested in Amtorg, which was the Russian-American trading company that Henry Ford and Albert Kahn negotiated with Arm & Hammer and with a guy named Saul Braun. So a lot of this kind of Russian, Deripaska coming in and, negotiating with Steve Feinberg and with this Steven Ratner, who's the, Bloomberg's money guy that negotiates this auto bailout. And then, of course, with Paul Whelan being from here as well and doing the recruiting of, possibly Butina herself. That stuff I think is the same. And that's, so I always say that, the Al Gore, Tipper, you got to think about Tipper with her going after 2 Live Crew and Prince and the, censorship. She was teamed up with James Baker's wife, and Prince was, corrupting Corinna Gore. And then Corinna Gore ends up marrying the great grandson of Jacob Schiff from Kuhn and Loeb. So it's a very tight group of families.
Yeah, and watch out for that purple rain.
I think it was Darling Nikki was the one that really got Tipper just, where she had to move into action. Was Darling Nikki was the song.
Thank you so much, Dave, for jumping in at the last minute to help me with this show this morning. I've really learned a lot from you, as I always do, and I know everyone benefited from it as well. I will see you soon, and thank you very much. We'll turn everything back over to the studio, and everybody stick around at Neighborhood News Studio for George Webb's Research Roadshow. Thank you again, Dave, and everybody have a great day.
Okay, that concludes our replay of John O'Loughlin's interview of David Underdown. David Underdown's Twitter, of course, is at David Cranmer UN1. All right, let's turn it over now to the great Andy DeBala, who is going to take it over as producer for the Research Roadshow. How you doing, Andy?
I am doing great, John Wilkins. How are you doing holding down the fort in Temperance, Michigan?
It's hot here. It was
It's
really
hot.
muggy last night.
Well, I'm sitting at about 43 degrees right now. If you can see behind me, this is actually the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, where the movie The Shining was birthed by Stephen King. He stayed a night here in room 217 and felt the ghost haunting him, and that inspired him to write The Shining. And that's all right here at the Stanley. I was a little disappointed. I thought the movie was actually filmed here as well, but that was all filmed at the Overlook Hotel. And the only movie filmed here is Dumb and Dumber. By Jim Carrey,
I love that
actually.
film. It's really corny, but I love that film.
Like the hotel bar scene and where they like race up the stairs, that was all filmed here. And they if you take a tour, they go through the ghost stories and all this stuff, and it is pretty exciting and pretty fun to stop out here and view a part of what makes America great. They talk about from sea to shining sea, and we got the Rockies here in between, and there's a lot of beautiful stops. So I'm out here in Colorado exploring. So thank you for holding down the fort over here in Temperance, Michigan, while I'm out having some fun, John.
No problem, Andy. Everybody needs a break. Okay. Have you had any emails from George?
I actually have not had any emails to George. I'm resending him the StreamYard link now to make sure he got it. I have some stuff to showcase today while we wait for George to pop in. So it's not a big deal, I hope.
Okay. If I'm going to be sitting standby, if George comes up with any comments about the Royal House of Savoy, or about Lyon or Turin or whatnot, I'll have some things ready.
Oh, as you know, with the new World Health Authority trying to establish their stakehold on this world. Thankfully George Webb was there trying to showcase what they were conspiring to do, and putting this international green zone in place, and I think we kind of we delayed it a little bit, to say the least, thankfully. So yeah, we're going to be switching gears here into George Webb. Hopefully he pops in after his intro. So we're going to be digging into some things here. But John W., see you on standby.
Okay, take it away.
I don't know what's going on right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning into Research Roadshow with George Webb. I just want to point you guys to the website real quick. I know a lot of you are already on here. We have changed things a lot the past couple of weeks. We are trying out some new things. We went in this NNS 24/7 direction, where we put a lot of effort into our work, and we wanted to keep the studio lights on. So we started the NNS 24/7 and put some of our videos behind a paywall. And we realized that it's hard to actually share your work and when everything's behind a paywall. And that's the research and what we do here, we feel is very important. And we feel that it really shouldn't be behind a paywall. So make sure you go to neighborhoodnewsstudio.com and hit that video archive tab at the top. And you can go, I gotta mute something here. And hit that video archive tab at the top. And you can go, I gotta mute. Sorry, I got something playing here in the background. But yeah, go to that video archive on the top, and you can check out all of our journalists' past videos from George Webb, Mark Kulak, John O'Loughlin, Chris Hunter, Wendy Sloan, Bill Taylor, Peter Duke. You guys know the originals. The list is growing. So make sure you hit that video archive and dig into the work we've been doing here at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. And for all of those of you that were under the NNS 24/7 paywall for that brief time period, we had it up. We appreciate your support. We know you guys just were trying to help us out a little bit, and we'll look to even up the pie here a little bit and throw something in your basket. We're working on some things here, but yeah, just make sure you go enjoy the content at neighborhoodnewsstudio.com under the video archive. It's all free now. Just go and watch everything. Like, share, send the videos to your friends, send the videos to your business partners, send the videos to people that you feel need to